Welcome to First Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, we're going to break down the Bantamweight battle. It's back on for the, well, I would say the queen of the Bantamweights. You can also make the case queen of the featherweights. Of course, the two-time reigning defending champion here, Amanda Nunes, is going to put her strap back on the line against Irene Aldana. Right now, we're seeing the Lioness about a 320 betting favor. We're going to break that down with Nick Kalikas here in just a second. Finocchiaro, Dan Vreeland, and Reed Kuhn for this before this day is done. I do want to look back very quickly. Kaikara France against Amir Albazi last week in the main event. We talk about it all the time here in the program on First Strike. When it hits the cards, buckle up, take a deep breath. You never quite know what the judges saw. I thought Kaikara France won a rather convincing unanimous decision. The judges did not see it that way. 2 of the 3 go with Amir Albazi. He wins via split decision. And therein lies the rub sometimes when you hit the cards. Let's bring in Nick Kalikas right now. Of course, does a great job. You can follow him and watch him on UFC Fight Pass, UFC on the Line, and the Gambler's Perspective podcast. Nick, always great to have you back on. Follow him on Twitter at Fight Odds. Very quickly, I know you can feel the outrage out there if you're on the wrong side of that Kaikara France decision. I thought it was pretty clear cut, but this is the I guess the problem in boxing and MMA. You get to a very subjective place once it hits the scorecards.
Correct. And you know what? We're always having some kind of controversial decisions. This happens time and time again. I honestly didn't think this one was too bad. And I had a little bit of piece of Cara France, meaning I gave the first 3 rounds. You can argue that Albazi won those first 3 rounds, and I think Cara France stole the last couple. Now, again, the first couple rounds, you could have found a reason to give him Cara France. So I think a split decision either way was actually okay. I know that's going to be an unpopular opinion because a lot of people believe Cara France won. So you got to consider that, though, right? Meaning that more times than not, when the media and the fans are scoring a certain way, it's probably right. It's more accurate than the judging, unfortunately.
Yeah, and again, and you know this better than anybody because you post those live odds a lot of times. I believe the live number there on Kaikara France was minus $4 going into the final minute of that 5th and final round. So obviously the betting community maybe saw it very differently from the way the judges did. Now, when you get to the main event here, Amanda Nunes against Irene Aldana, I guess if you're going to back the Lioness, you hope it doesn't hit the cards, potentially in a 5-round bantamweight bash here. What do you make of the number right now? 320 we're seeing here for the Lioness. Arguably, you can make the argument the greatest female MMA practitioner we've ever seen.
Yeah, I do think the line's a bit high. I personally got on the Aldana side at plus 330, plus 300, plus 290s. So I got ahead of it a little bit because I figured the line would drop. My price is significantly lower on Nunes. Doesn't mean she shouldn't be favored, but I think she should be closer around minus 250. I mean, top end 275, 280-ish for the Nunes side. And it's based on what we've seen lately. I know that's not fair because what you just said, Nunes is definitely one of the GOATs, if not the female GOAT of, the best of all time for sure. But that being said, I mean, the glimpse that we just saw recently in the Pena fight where she lost, I understand she rebounded and got the win back, but still, that's an eyesore in some spot that we're not really used to seeing Nunes in. So if you're seeing some of those come out at this point of time in her career where, honestly, it's that silk pajama type of thing. I mean, she's making more money than she ever made before. I mean, what is the drive and the desire to go out there and keep on reigning like she did? So I really think Aldana's coming in here in a good spot. She's getting better. She's improving. She matches up physically well with a girl like Nunes too. So I don't think that the people laying the chalk on Nunes are going to be very happy when it's all said and done, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there you go. And again, we just saw with Valentina Shevchenko against Alexa Grasso, big stunner there at 125 pounds. Again, don't know if the Lioness should be this big a favorite. I'm looking at the total here. And again, when she lost, you mentioned it to Juliana Pena, right? It was in that, I believe, in that second round. It comes quickly, sometimes in defeat. It is set at 2.5. And you're not laying a lot of juice there, minus $1.25. That's obviously because we're expecting finishing potential, quite frankly, on either side. Is that why it's aligned the way it is?
I personally feel like, I mean, a lot of people are expecting if there's going to be a finish of this fight, it's probably Nunes getting it done because that's what she does time and time again. But I do feel like Aldana can kind of weather that storm, and Aldana can be there over that, 2.5 round spot where if there's going to be a finish, I really think it's Aldana probably finishing Nunes earlier in that. If that makes sense, it's crazy, right? Because I'm saying Aldana, she's so tough that maybe she gets she wears it for the first few rounds. I understand she's markable, she gets marked up. You can see the battle that she's in more times than not, but she's going to be there in round 4, round 5. That's the difference. A lot of, you know what I mean? Where Nunes, we saw that glimpse. Her cardio conditioning in the past has been kind of spotty up and down. So if there's going to be a finish, it probably favors Aldana inside the distance. And I think Aldana can kind of survive the onslaught that Nunes brings as this fight kind of progresses. So it is kind of strange. I think if you're backing the Nunes side, I think he goes over that 2.5. If you're backing the Aldana side, there's a possibility that it goes under. But for me, I would play the over where the price is right now.
There it is. And again, if you think it's going to go all 5 to hit the judges' scorecards there, it is 2-1. You can get there plus $2 without picking a victor. So, but I think that's really sage advice there, Nick. Be wary because, again, there is very much finishing potential here for the upset potential here with Aldana if she gets it done earlier. We've seen that happen with Nunes, not many times, but it has happened in the past. When you look at the co-main event here, and you got 2 fan favorites, obviously, Beneil Dariush against Dubronx back in there, Charles Oliveira. And right now, Dubronx is the dog to Beneil here, and we're seeing Dariush about minus $1.55 here, the comeback in the former champ at 135. Both guys right around the same age. It feels like Dariush is that overlooked guy in the lightweight division for years potentially, but everybody, certainly the betting community, knows how tough he truly is.
Absolutely. And that's the thing here. I mean, a lot of people are probably shocked looking at Oliveira being of the dog, saying, how is he? He was just a champion. He dominated. He went on that run. A lot of people were arguing that he might be the GOAT in the lightweight division already, surpassing Khabib, all this stuff. And now he's a dog to Dariush. Who's Dariush? That's what I think the narrative is out there for a lot of fans. But make no mistake, the people that have been following the sport for a while, the people that are in the know realize how good Dariush is, and he should be favored in this fight. He has more ways to win this fight. I think if this fight hits the scorecards, which I don't think it will, he's going to probably win if it does hit the cards. Now, both these guys can finish, of course. Both of them have knockout power. Both of them have submission ability as well. So you're looking at 2 guys that can go out there and just do everything. So this is an awesome fight, but I do see Dariush being the rightful favorite here, and the sharp action is coming his way as well. So now that doesn't mean we're not going to see some dog buyback on Oliveira, because there's going to be 2-way sharp opinion here for sure hitting the market. But right now it's on the Dariush side. Well,
to your point there, Nick, look at the total, right? 2.5 potential 3-round co-main event here, plus money, plus $1.45 to go over 2.5. Again, without picking a winner, if it hits the cards, which you don't think it will, plus $1.80, you got to lay $1.80 if you want to back that under at 2.5. Are you seeing any money come in on the sides or on the totals here? Because again, right now would indicate that we think we're getting a finish one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, the total hasn't been blasted all that much yet. I think we're going to continue to probably see it go under. If anything, I'm looking over. If you guys catch me looking to the left, it's because I have my Don Best screen and my Spank Out screen here to the left. So I'm kind of gauging the market as we talk in real time here as well. So, but yeah, I think we will, if anything. I mean, like I said, the finishing potential and then the defensive flaws that we have on both sides. Meaning, Dariush is in wars, man. He's been clipped before. He's been put out early in fights. And then Oliveira, even though he's got all that offensive finishing ability, defensively, he is flawed at times. So this is just a crazy firefight that it's going to definitely tempt people to come in on the under. But once it gets to a certain point, you got to be careful, because I could see this possibly slowing down after a crazy first round and maybe Dariush getting some takedowns, getting top position, and maybe riding it out. Like I said, I don't think that's the way it kind of plays out, but I do think Dariush is possibly live, and a lot of action is going to continue to come in on the under.
You know, people are going to be looking for that plus money, right? And when you look at the method of victory here, you get really good, juicy numbers either way. If you like Oliveira, KO, TKO, or DQ, that's 4-1, right? If you're looking by sub, plus 475. We've seen him do both of those method of victories many times over. The same is true with Dariush, right? KO, TKO, or DQ, it's almost 5-1. Sub, where he's probably more apt to get this thing down to the ground, plus 325. Would you say, if you like Charles, forget the method of victory, just give me the plus money as the dog?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would think that's fair. But inside the distance, if you're getting a little bit more value, is very tempting too. So whatever you can, because he's not, look, I would not bet Charles by decision. Forget it. Just leave that out the window right now. Because like I said, he probably spends more time on his back if that's the case. So he's not going to be a fan-friendly decision for him. Optical, like, you know what I mean? If it hits his cards and they see him on his back, it's probably not going to be good visually for the Oliveira side. So if you're going to bet him inside the distance or straight, for sure.
Yeah, win by finish for Oliveira, to your point there, is plus $1.70. So you're getting a little bit of a better number. Again, not thinking that he would be able to win a 3-round decision fight. You got 50K Ige back in there against Nate the Train. Landwehr's back in, and Nate right now over $2 betting underdog in this one. It's got a lot of fireworks potential. Certainly, that's why he's called 50K Ige, because every time he's in there, he's looking for a bonus. What do you make? It's interesting because Ige feels like the guy that's been in the wars, and yet he's 3 years younger than Nate. How are you seeing the money move on this one, if so at all?
Two-way sharp opinion on this one as well. I mean, Ige got hit early on, causing the line to float up to around minus 280 or so. And then we saw some buyback, sharp action coming back in the other way. So you do have two-way sharps here conflicting here across the market. And I understand it. I mean, Landwehr as a dog is very tempting. I mean, you know what you're getting. He's fighting for your money. He goes in there. He's pretty durable overall. He's just a grinder. He's in your face. He puts a lot of pressure on. And he's got a little bit of finishing ability too, but Ige is just the sniper here in this spot. He's more technical. I think he's better across the board. His only concern should probably be the takedowns that Landwehr is going to kind of throw at him. Grind him up against the cage, maybe try to steal a takedown or two and control him a little bit. But I don't think Landwehr is going to get it done here. So I think it's going to be Ige kind of sniping him. So I do think the chalk side is probably right here. And if you're getting anything under 300, it might be worth a stab. A small stab because, again, you got to respect the Landwehr side. But I agree with the sharp opinion that hit the Ige side more so than the Landwehr.
I love the way you described Landwehr there, though. He fights for your money. If you're betting on him, you know he's going to be a live dog, but maybe technically right now might be outmatched against 50K Ige. Got about 30 seconds to go. Very quickly, is there any other fight in this card here? Obviously, when you get a big pay-per-view, you got a very deep card. Any other fight that you've seen a lot of movement on or expect to see some movement on before we get to Saturday?
Man, there's so many. I guess the intriguing one for me is Imavov and Curtis. Curtis kind of a quick turnaround, a little bit disappointed in the way the Gaslam fight ended for him. It was a very close fight. And Imavov, of course, fighting his former training or his training partner, Curtis's training partner, Strickland recently too. So a lot going into that fight. It seems like the sharper side right now is Imavov. I wouldn't lay the chalk though. I would probably stay away.
Interesting one there with Action Man Curtis back in there. Again, check out UFC Fight Pass, UFC On the Line, and the gambler's perspective. Nick, always great catching up with you, my friend. Enjoy the fights. We'll catch up again next week.
Thanks, Dave.
When we're back, we're going to go to Lou Finocchiaro in Arizona next here on First Strike. Continuing this edition of First Strike, Dave Ross here at Circus Sportsbook in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Let's go out to Arizona to catch up with our guy, Gamblu. But before we get to that, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and feature events for all MMA events. Eligibility restrictions to apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for all the terms and conditions. Let's get out to the aforementioned Gamblu. You can follow him on Twitter there. He's the host of the About Business podcast. Does a great job with a weekly article right here on VSiN.com. Lou, great to have you back for a big pay-per-view like we have. You look great. Look like you got some sun out there in Arizona. Looks lovely this time of year. I do want to get to a couple fights I know you have circled already on the card. When you got a guy like Eric Anders, of course, the pride of Alabama, playing linebacker back in the day there against Marc-Andre Barriault. And right now you look at Marc-Andre, and he is a small favorite, about minus $1.35, with Eric Anders roll tide at plus $1.15. What do you make of this matchup here?
Well, first of all, Dave, thanks for having me on. I always get a little nervous when you compliment me so much up front. I wonder what.
It's a good glow you got.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. You know, it's sunny here. Nonetheless, it won't be sunny in Vancouver where they're fighting this weekend. And this Anders Barriault fight happens to be one of the six where you have a Canadian in a matchup against a ship-in. The ship-in, Eric Anders, who most recently fighting at Fight Ready, just recently for this fight, switched to the MMA lab, which should be of note. He now trains with Jared Cannonier and some other large bodies over there. However, oftentimes a guy that moves gyms a couple of times, that may not be the greatest sign, first of all. Anders, I regard as, without question, the finest NFL athlete that's ever made it into the UFC. And you think of NFL guys being studly, that doesn't mean they can fight. Look at Greg Hardy. He's getting knocked out everywhere. What Eric Anders has been able to do in the UFC is really remarkable. It shows you what kind of athlete he is. Now, that all being said, he's 35 years old. It's hard to teach a and steer an old dog into some new ways, especially if there are some habits built in. Barrio's the younger man. He's fighting in front of a home crowd, and I think he's quite honestly more versed than Eric Anders, the great athlete. And this is a matchup between a mixed martial artist and a great athlete, and I'm going to lean to the mixed martial artist in Barrio.
Yeah, I think it's a great handicap. And again, you mentioned Anders, of course, played linebacker there for Nick Saban at Alabama. Ovin St. Preux played some defense as well at Tennessee. So we've had some great athletes, but your point is well taken. It's really hard at 36 to start to learn new visions, kind of a wrestler coming in here and a striker for Anders. It does feel like Barrio has got more ways to win that fight. Let's get to Nasruddin Imavov against the action man, Chris Curtis, back in this one as well. And again, everybody seems to want to root for Chris Curtis, and they call him the action man, but sometimes he doesn't give you enough action in there. Will he give you enough to back him at a plus price tag, right about plus $1.30 right now?
Well, he's been a great story, and he's been a guy I've faded a little bit, and it's worked out the last couple fights, but it's also bounced the other way. The guy's focused. He overachieves. He's finally fighting at $170, which is his natural weight. For a while, this is a 185 fight. He's really a 70er. And so now fighting at 85, I think he's at a little bit of a disadvantage. I like him. I like his explosion. I like the fact that I shouldn't say everyone, but there's been a slight trickle of money coming in on Imavov. But when we look at Imavov, we're looking at a taller, longer, younger man, probably one that didn't show his best self in his last fight. And for that reason, there might be a little bit of lack of respect on his side. In a fight that I think is going to be really good, I also think in a fight that's only 3 rounds, I think this is going to be very close. I think it's going to be a decision. And rather than take Imavov as a favorite, I might be looking Imavov via decision where I could squeeze a negative number into a plus number.
Yeah, plus $1.40 if like Imavov via decision here. For the fight just to go the distance here, we know Action Man obviously gets the hands going. You can see why a sub at 25-1 is not a likely pathway to victory for Chris Curtis. KO, TKO, or DQ at plus 450 could, but would you look at that laying that $1.50 if you liked Imavov and say, all right, I don't have to pick a winner. I just got to make sure it goes all 3?
Yes, I think that's how it goes. I have that respect for Curtis, and I don't think Curtis can finish Imavov, even though Imavov gasses we've seen him gas in that 3rd round. So Curtis is going to be 15 rounds full of it, and Imavov's going to have to he's going to have to show his best. Now, Imavov was fighting Gastelum in his last fight, which was a late change and a diametrically different kind of a fighter than he had to fight. So he took a short notice fight, looked terrible. I think Imavov's price is artificially depressed here, and there might be value on him.
It's interesting because there's certain fighters in the UFC roster that I look at and I go, well, this guy's got to be close to 40 on the other side of 35. Because they've been around a while. And then you realize they're just not that old. Dan 50K Ige is one of those guys for me that I look like and I go, man, he's just been in so many wars. We've seen him in main events. So we've seen him for so many years. And yet he's still relatively young at 31. Nate Landwehr actually is 3 years his senior in this fight. Ige right now, minus 250. Landwehr is one of those guys that I know you and I have talked about before. Right? He's kind of a fun guy to root for. Great mouthpiece when he gets on the mic here. And it does feel like the Nate train's in effect. Is he live for you at plus 210?
I'm not sure, but I can sure talk about what a great clash of styles this will be with Ige having deft footwork, precision striking, and he uses volume. I don't believe Ige's ever been put out of there. Meanwhile, on the other side, the train, Nate Landwehr, is exactly what he broadcasts himself to be. Yes, that's one. He's power personified, he's pressure, and he's going to come right at you. In many ways, he's the bull made for the matador in Ige. The question will be, can Ige stay away from any of those elbows, knees, and some of the infighting if the train can get Ige pressed against the fence? I think this is a good stylistic fight for Ige. That said, I hate the price, and I'd have to look elsewhere. Maybe Landwehr does the unthinkable, or rather than just Landwehr does the unthinkable and stop Ige, which I honestly think is improbable. Maybe the fight doesn't go the distance where you can squeeze out some kind of plus prize.
I'm right there with you, though. We understand the technical skill that Ige has in this fight, but I just not in that business of laying 250. If it did hit the cards, we just saw what happened last week, Kai France. Amir Albazi, buckle up. You can see win by decision would be plus 250 for 50K Ige, and then 5-1 if you like Nate. So it is telling us that maybe a stoppage is in play, to your point there. I do want to get to the co-main event here in the time that we have before we get to the main event. And whenever you have Du Bronx back in there, Charles Oliveira, we know what a popular champion he was. Beneil Dariush is one of those quizzical fighters. Like, we know how good he is and how technically sound he is, but it almost seems like he gets forgotten in the lightweight conversation. But he is a favorite now at $1.55 and growing. What do you make of this matchup, which could be maybe the most anticipated fight on the card?
On the card and in the last 6 months. I mean, when you look at the first half of this fight year, there's been some doozies. This belongs right there with, if we're really handicapping the pedigree of each fighter. And Du Bronx, is enough said. If you take away the Makhachev fight, the guy sawed through Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler. I mean, come on, and he sawed through them. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have
Dariush.
Yeah, you have Dariush, look at me, I can't even remember the guy's name. He's Mr. Understated. He pumps the Bible a little bit, but his skills are exactly the same as Oliveira's. In fact, I think Dariush has made it clear he would roll with Oliveira, and I think Oliveira would be willing to do it, except I think there's more advantage for Charles on the feet here. Dariush has found himself in some firefights and found his way out. But in that Drakkar Klose fight, he was stung, and it was Klose getting impatient that ran into one that lost it for him. So I think here, I lean to the dog Oliveira. I lean to him because I think this is going to be a stand-up fight, and I think Oliveira has a little bit more of a polished stand-up game.
Only have about 40 seconds to go, so I don't want to shortchange you all the way on the main event here, but I know you're going to give it out on the Bout Business podcast, and I'm sure you're right about it at VSiN.com. The main event with the Lioness Amanda Nunes here, is the dog in play with Irene Aldana? No.
No, I don't know how. If we get a motivated Nunes, I don't know how Aldana can really compete with her. When we look at the total in this fight, I think we're seeing a 2.5. That says it all. Usually it's an over 330 in a women's fight, 2.5 when they're fighting 3 rounds. This is a 5-round fight. I think we'll see a competitive Aldana for 2 rounds, and then the fight will end.
Yeah, the tail of the tape certainly backs up what Lou is breaking down there. Again, check him out at Gamblou on Twitter and the Bout Business podcast, and also VSiN.com. Lou, always great to have you on the show, my friend. Appreciate you as always. Going to Chicago next with Jordan Sherwood. Come on back. Take your sports betting game to the next level this summer with a VSiN Pro subscription. Sign up now for just $9.99. Get access to everything we do, which includes daily pro picks on all the summer action, which includes NFL and college football futures, premium analysis from our team of top handicappers and industry experts, 24/7 video access, and pro tools like our exclusive betting splits, showing you where the public and smart money is going, and sharp money for every single game to give you an edge. So start betting smarter. Visit VSiN.com/subscribe and sign up now. We go back out to the great city of Chicago and catch up with Jordan Sherwood. It's been a while. Mom's been noticing your absence. Atwood on ESPN 1000, host of the Unnamed MMA podcast. And Jordan, sporting a new look. Is it already winter in Chicago? Is that why you need the beard?
That's the reverse summer beard. And hopefully Mama Ross likes it. I know it's been a couple weeks since I've been on. Hopefully she thinks yours is good. Mine's maybe living up to those standards. But nonetheless, good to talk to you. Good to see you, Dave, and excited about UFC 289.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll get Mom's approval. We'll find out. I'm sure I'll get a text about it soon. Let's talk about the main event here, because when you look at the lioness, Amanda Nunes, obviously you can make the claim. I'm right there with you. This is the GOAT of women's MMA, right? Bantamweight division, she's still the champ at featherweight, even though that division really isn't active anymore. Juliana Pena looks like that's been put to bed. The rematch, she was dominant in it to get the belt back. Are we still looking at the greatest version of Amanda Nunes? You look at Irene Aldana, the opponent here, everything very similar, height, weight, obviously, and even reach. But we have a big discrepancy when it comes to the number here, laying 320 with the lioness. Is that properly lined, Jordan Sherwood?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's what we've come to expect with Amanda Nunes title fights. I mean, she's the greatest of all time. I consider her pound for pound amongst all MMA fighters, not just on the women's side of things. And I think this is a matchup that she can certainly take advantage of. But I will say this. You always have to question about motivation for Amanda Nunes. It's amazing she's still competing at this level at 35, about to become a mom for a second time, but she still wants to take on all comers and defend her status as the greatest. Irene Aldana is no joke. She has the rightful place to be in this title contention, even though she's taking this fight on short notice. You mentioned the skill set. She's also a fighter that's very rarely stopped. Obviously, we've seen Amanda Nunes, you showcase her power, utilize that to get fighters out of there. But Aldana's a very good boxer. She's no slouch on the ground, so she's not going to be intimidated if the fight does go to the ground against Amanda Nunes. So I think certainly if you want to play Amanda Nunes, you have to be smart, Dave, and you have to put her into your parlay with a couple other fighters. But my play is actually on the total. I love seeing plus money at 3.5, and I love seeing even more at plus 4.5. I think Irene Aldana is a tough out. And I think the way to win this fight, Amanda Nunes is going to have to dirty it up. She's going to have to push Aldana against the cage, utilize some dirty boxing, maybe even replicate what Holly Holm did 3 fights ago against Irene Aldana in a win that Holly Holm had over in Abu Dhabi, a 5-round fight. And I think that's where we have. And look, we're not questioning Amanda Nunes' cardio anymore. Like, that was a suspect years ago.
Right.
It's not anymore. So, look, I think I'm not confident that Amanda's going to go out there and finish and smoke, Irene Aldana. So I like the decision here. So I like the over at 3.5 and 4.5 as a play.
You know, you've got one interesting prop there for the fight just to hit the cards. And when it hits the cards, we just saw it last week with Albazi and Kaikar France. Hold your breath, depending on no matter which side you have, right? Just for the fight to go the distance, you get 2-1 plus $2, and you don't have to pick a winner. Is that something that might entice you?
It could, but I really don't think I'm going to see a fight that Amanda Nunes loses to a striker. If you were talking about Juliana Pena because of the wrestling standpoint and controlling her, and we've seen Amanda Nunes get taken down before, going back to some of her earlier fights, then I believe it. But I think if we're getting a finish, we're going to get Amanda Nunes just guessing out. I guess like she did against Juliana Pena and Aldana, getting her out of there. Or we're going to see Amanda Nunes go to the judges' scorecards. That's my pick.
Yeah, I'm totally. I understand that logic there because, again, it would seem like it would be difficult for Irene to get her out of there early. That's where the under would come in play if you like the dog here to get it done early. But again, 2.5 is where it's set, so it's showing you that they do believe, at least out here in Las Vegas, there is some finishing potential. But I think you're right. You're going to get some plus money there if you think the fight might go longer into the night north of the border in Canada. Let's get to the co-main because Beneil Dariush is such an intriguing guy to me because he feels like he's still an enigma, right? He's 34. He's actually older than Dubronx in this fight, Charles Oliveira. It's like you forget about Dariush and how good he is, but has not been forgotten by the odds makers because we're talking about, you can make the argument for Charles Oliveira's lightweight reign. It was dynamic and it was a who's who. And now he's plus money against Beneil. What do you make of the co-main?
Well, first off, do the MMA gods listen to me? Can we see these two guys go to the ground? Can we please see these guys compete against each other on the ground?
Charles said he said he doesn't mind going to the ground with Beneil.
That would be amazing. I mean, just to see that, if it's just for a minute in the first round, I would love to see it. Yeah, look, Beneil Dariush is the unsung hero of the lightweight division. He's taken on all comers. He's dominated guys. He's finished guys. And quite frankly, he would be on even a further run Alexander Hernandez didn't surprise him back in 2018. I understand why Beneil Dariush is the slight favorite. He carries power. That has caused some issues for Charles Oliveira before. He's obviously well-versed on the ground, and that, obviously is something that maybe they cancel each other out with Charles Oliveira. And look, how's Charles Oliveira going to respond after, his most recent loss, losing the title in the way that he did? I think absolutely, and it's kind of a no-brainer. You look for a finish for sure. Both these guys have a finishing mentality. Oliveira rarely is ever in a fight that goes to the judges' scorecards. But just as I talked about with you in the last fight that Oliveira lost, and then prior to that in the wins over Chandler and Gagey and Tony Ferguson, you got to play Charles Oliveira at plus money. You just do. The guy is he finds ways to win when you don't think he can. I'm not as confident as I was when he was on that run a couple fights ago, but I still think at plus money, there's value in the Bronx for sure.
The problem here, if you get too cute with backing the dog and the former champ and do Bronx Oliveira, KO, TKO, or DQ 4-1. Sub, they'll give you a plus 475. But because he does both, right? He takes shots and somehow recovers. If a fight goes to the ground with Dariush, which is a very good possibility, if he hurts Dariush, he could look for a finish that way for a sub, or he could go ground and pound. Would you just take the plus money with Charles instead of going method of victory?
Yeah, I would. I mean, look, I wouldn't be surprised if Oliveira snatches something because he's so talented. But Beneil Dariush is just so good. What I've seen is that he's been finished before via strikes, via TKO. So if you need to play something, you're itchy. You'll lend credit towards the TKO. But again, how trustworthy is Oliveira? Has he fully recovered? From the finish that he suffered? So I think just inside the distance, the under for both those guys is the play. On the
Uber tail of the tape, DuBronx does have 4 of the check marks on his side, Dariush 3 on his. Should be a really competitive, intriguing co-main. In the time we have allotted, let's talk about 50K Ige against Nate Landwehr here. We know Nate the Train. He's get on the Nate train, baby, and all this. You can get over $2 right now against 50K. What do you make of Ige? He's 3 years the junior here, but he feels like the old vet who we've seen in so many firefights and main events.
Yeah, and look, he's coming off one of his best performances. The knockout of Damon Jackson the last time out. I think that's going to cause issues for Nate Landwehr. I think they match up evenly from like a pressure cardio standpoint. But what's caused issues for Nate Landwehr before is guys with power and guys with either power that can get him early, like Uriah Faber did a couple years ago, or just guys that get over time, utilize boxing, utilize striking, and just, get that scar tissue going on Nate Landwehr or get him out of there. So I don't think that the wrestling and the pressure fighting and Nate Landwehr is going to cause any issues for Dan Ige. I think Dan Ige is going to have to go into your parlay for sure. I don't have a lend or a lean towards a method of victory. So we'll stuff Amanda Nunes and Dan Ige into a parlay probably with 1 or 2 other fighters.
Yeah, I see that because the danger there is if he can't get Landwehr out of there, maybe it's a points fight that Ige wins if it goes to the cards. So maybe better off because, again, from the experts here we've had so far, it feels like Ige technically is superior to the Nate train, but I won't tell Nate that we said that if he wins. Let's get very quickly in the final minute that we have Barrio against Eric Anders here. Of course, the former linebacker back in the day at Alabama, Nick Saban, striker wrestler here against Barrio. Is there upset potential, or do you think Mark Andre is the way to go here?
Well, this is one of those Gamlu specials. Wait till the weigh-ins to see what Eric Anders looks like. If he looks solid on the scale, the weight cuts didn't affect him. I like him for the upset. Marc-Andre Barrio likes to bully people, utilize his power. Anders can match him athletically and physically. And I think if you recall, I do like to fade Barrio. And I was wrong before against the Cuban Missile Crisis. But fool me right, shame on you. Fool me right twice, shame on me. I'm willing to risk it. I like Eric Anders as the upset play here early on a Tuesday.
Very quickly, 20 seconds, the unnamed MMA pod. Any Chicago flavors coming up here?
Well, we've got Josh Thompson on the card tomorrow to talk about the Bellator card that's coming to Chicago. Yeah, so he's going to be on the pod tomorrow. We'll also give out our fight picks for UFC 289. Should be a good one.
I'm sure Mom's going to love the beard. It looks great on you, Jordan. Appreciate you as always, my friend. When we come back, we're going to Washington, D.C. to catch up with Reed Kuhn next. Back here on First Strike. Dave Ross here in Las Vegas. Let's go back to the nation's capital to catch up with Reed Kuhn. You can follow Reed, as I do when I was on Twitter, at Fightnomics. Of course, does a great job at ESPN Plus, MMA contributor and the author of Fightnomics. And again, just to point out, throughout the hour here on First Strike, you've been seeing our Uber tail of the tape. That's Reed Kuhn. That's what he does. So when you see those fine numbers, they come to us courteous of the man that we're speaking to now. Reed, always great to catch up with you, my friend. I want to talk about the main event here. I know you've got tons of data on the GOAT when you're looking at Amanda Nunes here, certainly 135 pounds. Is this when you look at the numbers, Amanda, we know how great she is at either weight, 45 or 35, but do you see, is it better for her at 35 than it is at 45?
That's an interesting question. I think in the past, I've sometimes taken a fighter and split them out by performance in terms of weight class. I don't normally do that. These are career cumulative stats. Regardless, Nunes has been facing elite competition for a very long time now. Doesn't matter which weight class she's in, she's facing the best. And so when you see her line up and she looks so awesome on paper, and then you pair that with the fact that she's been facing elite competition, it makes it even more impressive. So, people talk about the GOAT. Rarely do I see statistics this good, and rarely do I see them earned against top competition like this. So, yeah, she's off the charts, and there's probably very little scenario I can see where I would be betting against her.
Again, she is the over $3 betting favorite here to retain her title here in the bantamweight division. When you look, and maybe for the novice, they're going to say, Irene Aldana, how did she get to this title shot? We kind of alluded to it there at 45. There's really no competition for Nunes. Is this just the case of Amanda, again, after beating Juliana Pena in the rematch, of trying to find new blood for the Lioness? And what have you seen from Aldana? I know the tail of the tape here certainly favors Nunes. Can she at least push her to maybe make an overplayable of 2.5 rounds?
I don't know about the total. I mean, I do think there's value on a finish for Nunes inside the distance play, but I don't like to get too cute with the over-under on the round totals. But the question about Aldana, I mean, she is a willing and confident striker, and maybe that's what their rationale was. They want someone who's willing to go toe-to-toe with her, who's pretty good with her hands. But that's also part of the problem here, because Nunes is so good with her hands, but she also has the ground game. And stylistically, once it gets to the floor, it's going to be a mismatch. And I do remember, even in Aldana's last fight, the way she got into this title shot was kind of a fluky body kick from the ground knockout of Macy Chiasson. I was actually in Vegas with you guys watching that fight. It was bizarre. I think it's the first time that's ever happened, a body strike from someone's back. And so, yeah, she was on her way to maybe losing a split decision in that fight. And now here she is fighting Nunes. I think this is just not a great matchup for her, but she is probably the type of fighter who's going to go aggressive, make it fun, give the crowd something to cheer about. She's probably willing to go out on her shield. And she's going to stand and trade. But I think ultimately Nunes has too much for her.
And very quickly, Reed, just if we're looking for a different method of victory here to try to maybe extract some better value, does the data lean towards KO, TK, or DQ if it's the Lioness here? Plus $1.50. Sub, she can get those if it hits the ground here, is plus 425. Does the data favor one way or the other?
Not too strongly, but the price is so divergent that if I had to pick one, I would say there is a greater mismatch on the ground, and the payoff is so much greater for a submission that if I had to pick one, I would go that route. But the safer play is inside the distance, because she might rock her on the feet and finish on the ground, but with a TKO. That's the trouble with these dual threat fighters, is that you're convinced they're going to get a submission, but they end up just finishing with a flurry of strikes. So that's hard to play. But overall, the inside the distance play is very reasonably priced considering what you're getting. You're getting Nunes in a fight with someone who's willing to bang and probably doesn't have much submission defense on the ground. So that screams inside the distance for me.
Minus $1.50 right there to not get too cute with the method of victory. I'm picking up what you're putting down there. Speaking of fighters that can beat you multiple ways, that's what we have in the co-main event here. Do Bronx back in there, the former lightweight champion, Charles Oliveira, against Beneil Dariush. And Dariush, we know, is kind of the forgotten guy at lightweight, but he is can be very dynamic both with his hands and if the fight goes to the ground. You don't see plus money very often on Oliveira. What's the data showing you? Is Du Bronx, as he normally seems to be, a live dog?
Yeah, he's always a live dog just because he has the nasty submission game. He has gotten a little too confident in his hands at times, but this is not a matchup where I'm as worried about that. because several fights in a row, he basically got dropped, and then his opponent got a little too aggressive and ended up getting submitted. And so this is a matchup where I think there is much less of a threat of Dariush just pummeling him on the feet. And I think Dariush has relied on his grappling so much, his wrestling, that he could get himself into trouble, into some bad spots. And Oliveira is just, he has one of those submission games that just seems to be superlative. I mean, he just lock in a choke from any angle. He has a good arsenal, but they're also so tight. So I do see upset potential here. It's, not a coin flip, but if you're going to give me plus money on Oliveira, I'll take that.
Yeah, it's hard to pass that up when you see it on the board there for one of the best title reigns we saw in recent memory in an absolutely loaded division. Just look at the names that Dubronx beat to get that title. But yeah, this will be a very intriguing co-main event. I do want to get to Dan Ige here against Nate Landwehr, and the train right now is over a $2 betting underdog. I guess we can see, and I'm sure the tail of the tape will bear it out, Ige much more technical, Nate more of that brawler. What are the numbers showing you here?
Yeah, Ige, I think, has been undersized in some of the matchups where he came up a little bit short. And that, thankfully, won't be as pronounced here. He's still going to be the smaller guy. He's just a little bit shorter than most guys in his division. But at least it's not as pronounced. The reach advantage is, almost negligible. But I think he is the more crisp striker. And he hits hard, by the way. He can drop people. And Landwehr has been dropped 3 times. His knockdown defensive rate his avoidance is a little soft. He lets people hit him, and he's been dropped. So I do think Dan Ige is going to test that chin at some point. The wild card is the ground game. Landwehr has done very well when he's been able to grapple, even though he's not necessarily the most eager wrestler. He doesn't jump for the takedowns immediately, but when the fight ends up there, he does well. Ige, on the other hand, has faced very good grapplers. He's never been finished, and he powers his way through. So assuming he might be in some bad spots, I think Ige eventually is going to get out. He is very tough to pin down and tough to knock out. I think you give him enough swings, he's going to put Landwehr down.
Wow, that's going to be a really good potential 3-round banger there, certainly between those two. Let's keep moving on the card. When you look at Marc-Andre Barriault, he's going to have the home crowd advantage in Canada, north of the border, against the former Alabama linebacker and Eric Anders. What do you make of Eric? Because he feels like a guy that certainly wants to intimidate you, wants to throw those heavy hands. Is there an upset brewing in this one?
I like Anders here, and I think that price is pretty reasonable if you're going to get even or plus money on Anders, because if you just stack up the competition that they've faced, their numbers are very even in performance. Like the actual statistics are almost dead even, kind of mix and match, give and take. But the competition that they've faced is very different. I feel like Anders has faced the tougher talent. He actually has a win early on, or a 5-rounder split decision loss, not a win, but he went 5 rounds with Lyoto Machida just after he was champ. I mean, he has faced elite competition, and Barriault just hasn't been there. And so when I look at the numbers being back and forth and very even, I got to believe that we're getting something better in Anders, and there's value in that. Now, you mentioned his hands. He does have heavy hands. He has 7 knockdowns scored. Barriault only has 2, and he's also been dropped once. And then you have the wrestling. Anders is definitely the more eager wrestler. He's been more successful on the mat. He has superior metrics there. So I think there's a bigger imbalance. And also there's a secret here with Anders. He is definitely in clinch control a lot, which is one of those hidden metrics no one even gets to see. And I have to break the data out especially just to see that. But he has a clinch game that will score points and grind people down. So I think that's also a wild card that helps him get through a round if he ever gets into trouble.
Very quickly, got about 90 seconds. I want to ask about Action Man Chris Curtis against Nasruddin Imavov here. What do you make of Curtis? Because can be a confounding fighter at times if you're backing him. Certainly he's a dog here because sometimes the action isn't always there from the action man.
I'm leaning Imavov here, but there's one thing of concern, and that's Chris Curtis has 100% takedown defense, which is kind of mind-boggling given that he's pretty far into his career at this point. Not even Gastelum took him down in that last fight. Imavov does have the superior ground game, and you're kind of counting on that. But what if he can't get it down? That's a little bit of a concern for me. But Imavov, much younger. He also has very crisp stand-up metrics as well as the well-balanced game, whereas Curtis is just a pure stand-up striker. He has no interest in going to the floor. So the question is does he finally get taken down? I think he finally does, hopefully. And Imamov is balanced enough to be able to get it there because you got to set up takedowns with the hands. Everybody knows that.
I only have about 20 seconds. Read very quickly. I see that Hudson Whiskey, New York. That's my family stomping grounds. 1 through 10. How does that whiskey rate?
Yeah, that's their baseline whiskey. It's pretty good. I'm actually even more a fan of their baby bourbon. But yeah, there's been some damage up there after a few winning weekends recently. We might have to add to the pile.
The First Strike crew's been on fire, so I can see why those whiskey, it's a little bit low on the shelf. Reed, appreciate it as always, my friend. Thanks for watching First Strike. Cash some tickets. We'll see you next week.